what is the role of technology in education today? And do you think that virtual education is going to replace the classroom education?
Let me just say that I'm a recent convert. As young as I am, when I was much younger and teaching, I was extremely resistant to technology and utilizing technology in the classroom. And I found it to be extraneous, I found it to be intrusive, and I found it to be unnecessary. It got in the way of real teaching, the way I envisioned, the way I conceptualized it. Even after working in virtual education, even with my job being all about technology and education and interpolating those two, it's really still only in the last year that I really came to believe, which is interesting for me. Because then it begs the question, well, what were you saying before this, right? Because I still had the job and it was still my duty to sell this. And in the end, it's really the last year where it's not just that I can justify what I do and say that what I'm doing really does matter and make a difference, but that I also believe that this is going to be the method through which profound transformative work happens in our world. I think here's the problem though, as Rosanna points out, is that we have access to a jet plane. We have access with the internet, with virtual education, to a jet plane. But it's not just about access to technology, it's about the imagination of how we utilize that technology. And we're nowhere close. So we have a jet plane and we got the keys and we're just driving around the runway and waving at each other and saying, hey, how are you? I see you got a jet too and I got a jet. We just, putter up and down the LaGuardia runway and we call that innovation. But the truth of the matter is that that's either a lie or that's delusional. Because what we're doing with that technology is essentially replicating the same practices, the same approaches, the same postures to learning that already haven't been working in the traditional format, throwing those same practices up online, and then having the audacity to call it innovation. But it's not. And in some ways you can make an argument that it's even regressive, that in some ways it's even more depressing to have access to that technology and use it in the way we are. Now, at the same time, with that said, it's really only a few years old. The blended learning movement, real virtual education, and the focus on it is really only a few years old. And in the same way, I wouldn't, meet your baby and say, look, we've been trying it out for a few months. It's just not looking good for you. You're a no-win situation here. I think the best is yet to come. But the problem is, how do you explain an airplane to someone who's only seen a wagon? And that's why I know I need help. Because what I tend to think about is, okay, well, how do we tweak this? But we're just nibbling around the edges. The game changer, the transformative elements of what we can do virtually are still yet to be discovered. Or if they've been discovered and we're looking right at it, we haven't exactly named it yet. And that's what I'm looking. I'm looking for networks. I'm looking for people to drive my thinking, to challenge my thinking, so that we can finally get this plane off the ground and in the air. And to your point about will it ever replace brick and mortar education, I've read statistics by folks like Christensen who say, even at its height, virtual education will only be utilized, only half of the population, in decades from now at most would use it. I don't know. I'm not so worried about how many people are using it. I'm worried about the ways in which they're using it. Regardless of how many people have access or not, people will use it if it makes sense. And what we need to figure out is how to stop making virtual education replicate and more like the brick and mortar, the face-to-face education. We need to allow that to be that. And we need to start focusing on the ways that virtual education can do what a face-to-face connection never can. By connecting people abroad with each other. That, that for centuries, for millennium, that, the majority of human beings would have lived and died within the same 2-mile radius in which they were born. And now that I can have a student of mine in Verona and a student of mine in Buenos Aires and a student of mine in La Romana, Dominican Republic, and a student in Barcelona, Spain, in a learning group that's peer-directed by one of my students in Miami, and then connected with a credentialed, certified, and passionate online educator. That's a game changer, and that's what gets me up in the morning.